Welcome to our ExQ and GSBA Cognitive Cocktail Happy Hour and Thought Leadership Watch Party. When grit is gold, grit is gold. I'm Sucheta Kamath, CEO and the founder of ExQ. We loved connecting with you during the GSBA Summer Conference, and we are excited to gather for another behind the scenes look at Full Prefrontal, our weekly executive function podcast series. During today's episode, I interview Dr. Laila Sanguras, educational scholar, lecturer in curriculum and instruction at Baylor University, and author of A Student's Guide to Grit and Greatness. Dr. Laila Sanguras discusses how we can help kids recognize the value of effort influenced achievement. By focusing on grit, she believes educators can unveil the secret that anyone who is at the top of their game got there by practicing invisible micro skills, enduring innumerable obstacles, and committing to life's big goals. Let's listen and learn. Welcome back to Full Prefrontal, where we figure out what powers the brain CEO to produce effective executive function and self-directed effort. I am your host, Sucheta Kamath, and my hope is that through these meaningful conversations and thought-provoking stories, we can all gain clarity and lead effective and productive lives. It's so exciting to have our guest today. Her name is Dr. Laila Sanguras. She's a lecturer in Department of Curriculum and Instruction and a co-editor of the Gifted Education Review, a newsletter for teachers and parents of gifted children. She is an author of 2 books I highly recommend. I am holding one as we speak, and this book is called Grit in the Classroom, Building Perseverance for Excellence in Today's Students. And she also is a mom of 6 children, and she brings her wisdom from terrain of being a parent, I bet. And finally, she presents at many conferences and has wonderful wisdom. I am so sure you will enjoy it. So welcome to the podcast, Laila. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really good. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So the podcast is about executive function, which is self-directed effort, which is self-regulation, self-awareness, strategic thinking, meta-awareness. So let's start with the definition of Angela Duckworth puts forth, which is grit is combination of this passion with perseverance, but towards long-term goals. How do you see this fit in the context of education? And let's talk about each element, the passion and the perseverance. And I guess the third element would be the long-term goal. So talk a little bit about defining grit for us.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you wanted to start with that, because one of the problems is that a lot of people, when they think about grit, they think about stick-to-itiveness, right? You just don't give up, you just keep pushing forward, and it really is, that's a part of it. Perseverance is absolutely a part of it, but the passion is what keeps you moving. So anytime anyone has ever done anything hard, they have wanted to quit, right? You hit the wall, and the part that gets you moving is the passion. So it's that you have always wanted to complete this degree, or you promised your kids that you would run a marathon, or your dad knows how much you want to write this book, and so you're going to make sure that you do that. So it's this passion piece that keeps you moving despite whatever the obstacles are that are in front of you. So in school, what we need to think about how we can cultivate each one of those if we want our students to be gritty. And then the same is true at home. We need to show that we value both of those things in a way that promotes kids, taking risks, trying new things, figuring out what they like, committing to those things once they start, once they say that they're going to commit to something, they don't give up, all of that. And then we can also really think about how we can help kids, even at the elementary level, set goals. And so I talk a lot about how we can set what I call these super stretch goals. And that's your dream. Like mine was, to be on Oprah. And, I didn't get there before she went off the air. So I'm going to have to.
Super soul, don't give up yet.
Yeah.
You do remind me of Brene Brown.
Yeah. So, I have to, so but so that's a super stretch goal. But then from there, I can start thinking about, okay, what are some SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, all of those things. And then from there, what are daily actions that I can take that will allow me to reach the SMART goals, that will allow me to reach the super stretch goals? Well, what ends up happening is as kids get older, we focus more and more on the SMART goals because those are measurable. So we can check the box, yes, you succeeded, or no, you didn't, you need to keep working on it. And we leave out that dream or the passion at the top. And by doing that, we are losing some of that passion. And we're also losing opportunities to reinforce the behaviors that we're seeing in our kids. So for example, my son, who is 13, and he wants to be a professional basketball player in the NBA, right? Typical 13-year-old boy. And if we were in person, you could tell that I am about 5 feet tall, and he's very, he takes after me in his height. And so there's a chance that he's not going to make it to the NBA. But what we don't want to focus on is we don't want to focus on the top and kind of not reaching that super stretch goal. Instead, we want to think about those daily actions that led to the SMART goals. So for example, if a SMART goal was that he wanted to make an elite basketball team for his age level, he could probably do that. The daily actions would be, that he commits to practicing every day for 20 minutes or whatever it is. And then if he fails to make it to the NBA, we can still look back and say, but look at all of these ways that you improved, how you committed to something, how you gave up time with your friends because you knew that this commitment was important to you reaching your ultimate dream. And we've got to help our kids see that they have control over those, the actions that they take and the decisions that they make. And we also have to recognize that, even if that failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just something that happens along the way if you're trying to reach any elite level of success.
No, I'm so glad that right off the bat you talked about the goal setting process, which is so difficult for students, particularly as it's part of that executive function abilities, which is to recognize the outcome and then create a path to reach that outcome through a plan. And then the biggest gap I see is that the goal may not be yours. The goal may be moms and dads, or goal may be your parent or your teachers. So let's say finish this assignment. That's not my goal. My goal is to hang out with my friends. And so suddenly now the history teacher wants you to write a paper or finish a project. So one of the gaps that I feel is unless and until somebody, a charismatic adult in the child's life, kind of shows the mission or the stretch goal, the ambitious ways to actualize your dream through daily actions, it is okay to pursue some of these goals that are not yours, but through that process of sticking with that process and engaging in skill building, you can achieve the goals. So I really like that goals need to be thought out more explicitly. How do you see, how can educators understand this gap? Because to me, executive function is part of the hidden agenda. It's the hidden curriculum. It's not taught explicitly as we teach math, science, Spanish. It is the very foundation on which the rest of the curriculum stands on. But that creating goals, their assignments are created, but the goals are not. The goals are implicit to the assignments. So how do you encourage the educators to translate that, which is implicit, and bring into or showcase it more explicitly into the curricular activities?
Yeah, if we are intentional about helping kids dream and then back up those dreams, then we can help them make connections between what we're asking them to do in the classroom and what they ultimately care about. Like you said, because a lot of times, sadly, they don't care as teachers about the same things that we care about.
Yes.
And so an example building upon, so my son, if his language arts teacher, for example, was aware of this dream, and he's thinking, I don't need language arts for any reason because all I need to be doing is practicing basketball. Well, one of the things that the language arts teacher can think about is ultimately what is the essential question behind what I am doing and what is the ultimate goal of my curriculum? Well, as a language arts teacher, it should be that I want to help you, you know, read, write, think, and, you know, and be able to discuss and be able to communicate effectively and intelligently in any environment, whether you are writing it, whether you're speaking it, whether you're on the elevator with someone. And so if you are a professional basketball player, let's say you make it to your dream. Well, my job as a language arts teacher now is to help you so that when you are interviewed by a reporter after the big game, you don't sound like a fool on the basketball court, right? You know how to keep your composure. You can, you know, explain the decisions that you made on the court, all of those things. And you feel good about being able to think on your feet and be able to, you know, communicate whatever it is that you're being asked to do. Well, the way that we get to that is that we need to look at, you know, really fine details of how Edgar Allan Poe wrote this poem. And then I need you to be able to articulate what a thesis statement is. And, you know, so you're sort of just practicing those micro skills that lead up to that essential question or the big goal of the course.
I love that. And I think what's coming up here is the role of effort and intentional practice. So talk a little bit about how does that connect, that deliberate practice to, and it's a sister skill of grit, or it is component of a grit. I feel one of the things that is missing out in daily educational, I wouldn't say language, but it's not put in the forefront of teaching. It's again embedded in the way you succeed. For example, if an assignment takes you 45 minutes and if you stick with it and actually answer all the questions, you are in a way showing grit. But if you look at an assignment that takes you 45 minutes and you say, oh my God, I don't want to do it. Right there, your relationship to that work is not coming from a place of value. It's coming simply by the amount of effort that I need to put in, particularly if I don't like it. So we are calling students to develop the same relationship to the content, whether they like it or not, and bring in these skills. How do you see one achieves that?
Well, I think we have to, as teachers and as parents, we have to make sure that kids understand that we all do things that we don't want to do. And yes, that, you know, that's sort of part of life. But then the other thing is that grit is a psychological strength that you need to develop before you actually need it. So it's kind of like self-defense, right? You don't take a self-defense class because you think, as soon as I walk out, I'm going to be attacked and I have to defend myself. Yes. You take it so that in the horrible chance that you are attacked, you can defend yourself. Well, the same is true for grit. You don't develop that skill to overcome obstacles, to not give up, to understand, you know, your interests, being able to articulate those interests. Like, you don't develop those skills because tomorrow you're going to need them or because they are important on the state test at the end of the year. It's because we know that at some point you are going to hit that wall, or you're going to approach an obstacle that is going to seem so large that you can't possibly see your way around it. And so what we need to do while our kids are home with us or in our classrooms, you know, with the safety of us, in our Zoom rooms, wherever they're coming to us from, yes, that we are providing opportunities for them to stumble and to recover from those stumbles so that they can build up that optimism, that they can overcome obstacles, that they can stick with an assignment that they didn't want to do. And looking back, they realize, oh, there was value to doing that. I learned this skill, whatever it is. So I think we have to really take seriously the opportunities we have while they're with us before they leave, because we all know that life is hard, and there are going to be times when it gets really bad, and we've got to help, whether it's at work or academic or personally or anything. We need to help them build up their capacity and their, like I said, their optimism that they can handle it.
There was a great story, and I'm now forgetting who the artist was. This was a photographer who took pictures, who documented old trains and trolleys, and then they became extinct in a way. In like by late 70s, I think they were gone, like these steam engines. But he was so passionate that he, out of hobby, like he became a reporter. But on the weekends, so he would just go on the. He lived in Pennsylvania, and as you know, there were a lot of like railway tracks. He would take pictures, and eventually became this highly celebrated artist. And when he died, they replayed one of his interviews, and he was talking about that when he was 6 years old, he had difficulty reading and writing, but he he would sit in his room, and from his window he would see this amazing river, and in the river he would see different ships, and he could distinguish every and each and every single ship based on the sound it made. But he said, my teacher never asked me.
Yeah.
And I was punished, and there was so much, the experience of education was so punitive that you're not doing this one thing that we are asking. But no, he was never made that, like the connection that you talked earlier. And I think that's where we might be missing the boat. So tell us a little bit about the culture of that teacher or the educational institute. What kind of culture they should have at the heart of this, where they put that discovery process ahead of the curriculum without compromising the curriculum. Is there a way to do that?
Yep. So I think there are always opportunities to introduce choice to students. And, one way that we can kind of stoke curiosity of our students is if we, tell them sort of the deep dives of our curriculum. So for example, I use the example of Edgar Allan Poe. I used to love teaching about Poe. And I would love to share sort of fun facts about Poe that, students may never know about him, or, or reading a poem and really getting into it and, sharing my enthusiasm with it, but then making sure that students knew kind of the relationship of the author to the speaker that he was talking to, and, kind of those sort of behind the scenes pieces that would get kids really interested. The same is true with history. We can share kind of the surface of the historical aspects, but then if we can also share stories of individuals who were involved in that time period, that can also spark students' curiosity and get them to ask questions. I think independent study always has a place and can always be tied to pretty much any content standard. If you are framing it within the math class, there's this independent study time that you have to investigate some sort of math concept that you're interested in, or a mathematician, whatever it is. There are lots of schools who use where they have, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's an opportunity for them to just pick anything they want. And they can study whatever it is that they want I think it's every Friday or something.
Elective?
Yeah, but it's the whole school stops what they're doing, and they all are studying this, they all get to choose their own kind of. And it's really a great opportunity, but I think we fall a little bit short in that when we give students choice, we also should be asking them to make connections to previous choices that they've made.
Yes.
Because if we ask them to sort of sew the thread between why they chose this topic and then this topic and then this topic, they can start to see, oh, I'm really interested in, female entrepreneurs, or turns out I really enjoy in being involved in these independent study projects that are about like the early 1800s or something like that, where it may seem, if the topics are isolated, they may seem unrelated. But if we ask them to make the connections, they still get to choose anything they want, but they have to connect their previous topic to this next topic. Then they can also start to articulate those interests that are driving them to choose whatever these topics are.
I love that. So when it comes to the way I see from executive function and its relationship to this passion, perseverance, and long term, is in passion, there's motivation, that sustaining focus in the area of interest or area of curiosity, even if there's no interest. Second, the perseverance requires task analysis skills, deliberate practice, good decision making, and error analysis. And then the final part, which is that long-term goals, achieving long-term goals requires planning and organizing, prospective memory skills, that delaying gratification. Tell us, how do you see the metacognitive skill fit in this picture of grit? Because there's one thing um, to pause and reflect, and there's another thing to pause and reflect and deduce correctly about the mistakes or the observations you make. And children by design are less equipped than adults are. And sometimes adults' own blind spots don't let them see or draw the right conclusions. So how do you propose we polish these metacognitive skills?
Yeah, I think, I talked about the shame that's associated with failure, and we have to figure out a way around that. And one of the ways that we can do that is start to think that experiences fall into one of four buckets. So it's either a productive success, which is when you really had to work hard for something and you got it. So you had your dream college, you had to work hard to get into it, and you got into that college. And unproductive success is one where you didn't have to work for it. So it's the equivalent of getting the trophy after playing t-ball, right? Everybody gets a trophy, everybody wins. As a little kid, it's your dream to have a trophy, so it's fantastic. But by the time you're 15, if someone hands you a trophy just for showing up, it's not worth anything. So that's the unproductive success. And then there's productive and unproductive failure. Unproductive failure is when you don't achieve whatever goal it is that you have set for yourself, and you don't take the time to think about it, to process it, anything, likely because of the shame or anger, and you are uncomfortable dealing with those feelings, so you just sort of push it aside and move on. And then the most important is the productive failure, and that's when you don't achieve what you sought out for, but you take the time to figure out a new plan. You think about, what are the decisions that I made that got me where I am now? What did I have control over? What did I not have control over? So identifying all of those obstacles so that you can, go about it differently the next time around. And that's really all it is, in the path to success, is just learning from, we say all the time, you learn from your mistakes. Well, I think we have to help kids figure out what exactly that looks like. How do you exactly learn from your mistakes?
Love that. So the research in grit talks about these, characteristics of people with high grit, being four characteristics. They have high level of interest, they practice deliberately, they have a sense of purpose, and the final is they harbor a sense of hope. The willingness to keep going. And I just love that because it's such an important emotional affair of particularly when you want to give up, or particularly when you don't see point of it all. It's the sense of hope. How do you, and you've written a lot about that and talk about a role of hope, and this particular ways of talking about becoming Oprah, right? Like the hope dealer, you say?
Yes.
So you get hope. Yes. So talk about hope, and how can we invite teachers, educators to become those who have a more than pessimistic attitude when it comes to children with difficulties? I think that's something I see time and again, particularly with executive dysfunction. Those who have behavioral problems, they get written off for being inappropriate or not recognizing the teacher's effort, and they get more punitive reactions from teachers. So what role can they play in infusing hope in students?
Yeah, if we are all in for grit, meaning that we are going to set high standards for our students, we're going to provide opportunities for them to struggle and opportunities for them to pursue their interests. There are going to be times where they are going to want to give up. That's a natural product of that. So in order to get through it, we have to buy into the idea that we are hope dealers. We are the people who need to, make sure that these, our own children and then the students in our classes recognize that they have so much power, and they need to constantly be helping kids understand that they can do it, that we're not setting them up for failure. We're setting them up to work and to practice the skills so that they can reach high levels of achievement. And that takes practice. It's not something you just wake up and do. And then I also, I think we also need to help kids understand that the most powerful voice that they hear every single day is their own. That's the voice that is in their head and that travels around with them everywhere. And we know that gritty people are also optimistic people, meaning that they can fail, and they can recognize that they're going to be okay. They can get a bad grade on a math test and not have their, world shattered because, or doubt their ability of becoming a mathematician later on in life. So we need to help them recognize that when they hear the voice in their head that's telling them they're not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, fast enough, whatever it is, that they need to shut down that voice and they need to replace it with the positive voices, that they can do it, that they've, and that's where the power of past experiences come in. Because if you just tell a kid you can do it, and the kid's thinking, I've never been gritty in my whole life, I can't do it. So instead we scaffold it and we say, do you remember last month when you really struggled with that math problem, and you worked on it and you worked on it, and then you set it aside because you were so frustrated, and then you came back to it and then you got the right answer? Do you remember how that felt? That's evidence that you can do this too, because you've done it before. And so we just want to build, it's sort of like building a wall of all of these experiences that help students believe in themselves. And it's just, further proof that they can do it.
I love it. And I love the way you break it down into doable actions. These are not fantastic ideas or like philosophy of life. It's actually can be lived through. So we can't end without talking about parenting. In my work has been influenced by one of my favorite researchers, Annette Leroux. She wrote a book called Unequal Childhoods in 2003. And she coined a term, you might have heard of this already, called concerted cultivation, which means a style of parenting or parental practice where parents attempt to foster their children's talents by incorporating activities that become how their lives get organized. And so parents talk and cajole, negotiate, and bargain with kids. And she speculates that concerted cultivation creates adults who then eventually, this particularly middle class and upper class, is these children, when they become adults, they know how to challenge authority, navigate bureaucracy, and manage their time. But the downside of that is that parents are exhausted. They're schedule driven and they're exhausted. And I find that I see a lot of that in my practice for the last 20 years, that setting up children for success becomes a project for parents rather than building gritty children. And I also wonder, parents have not really taken a look at if they are gritty people or not. You can be successful without really cultivating some of these mindsets that you're talking about. So how, first of all, would you frame grit in the context of parenting? What are the top of the mind things people should think about if they're parenting children?
I think we have to buy in to the fact that it's okay for our kids to struggle. So it's okay for them to face natural consequences. We can't always and should not come in and save the day. And I think I see a lot of parents, wanting to protect their children from painful experiences that they've had. And that ends up where they become sort of that lawnmower parent, where they're getting rid of all of the obstacles in front of the child before they have a chance to approach those obstacles. And we don't want that because we want our kids to struggle, and you have to buy into that. So we want to help our kids by setting firm and loving limits. So, I remember reading early on that as a parent, you say no when you mean it. If you don't mean it, don't say no, because students or kids need to know that your word means something. And so I've caught myself sometimes automatically, one of my kids asking about something, and I'll just say no. And then I'll think, well, actually, you probably could do that. And so I'll have to backtrack and say, I spoke too soon, this can work in this way. We want to make sure we use enforceable statements. So if we say that if you don't do X, then this is the consequence, then that actually needs to be the consequence. Again, they need to understand that our word means something. We have to help them understand the importance of self-discipline and executive functioning skills, just like you've been talking about for years. So it's really important that they know the importance of goal setting, of holding back their impulses, organizing, time management, all of that. And that, we can help them and support them through it, but that, ultimately this is their responsibility. We also can help parents understand the importance of delayed gratification. And, that kind of builds upon that idea of you have to work for something. That's that productive success piece. And then also, I think more and more we have to help our kids understand strategies that they can use to reduce anxiety, because we're seeing more and more of that sort of anxiety in kids for whatever reason, and we need to help them understand how they can monitor and self-regulate themselves in an anxious environment.
So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in today. I'm so happy to have our guest and brilliant mind, Dr. Laila Sanguras. And please stay connected. Sign up if you haven't already for our, subscribe to our podcast, and you'll get a newsletter. And please check out, I will be adding show notes so that you can access Dr. Sanguras's work and order the books that she's talked about and I've talked about today. And thank you again. And have a fabulous day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our interview, and we are excited to keep the conversations going. We would love to connect this summer as you continue planning for the upcoming school year. Please reach out to us, and my email is sucheta@exqinfiniteknowhow.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for full prefrontal podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Remember, be brave, be bold, and have fun.